The fluorescent light above the registrar's desk buzzed faintly, like something dying. The room smelled of old paper and quiet judgment. Stifled laughter drifted from the bench behind her. "Are you sure?" the registrar asked one last time. Emma Whitfield gripped the pen until her knuckles went white. Then she signed. The man beside her worn boots, oil-stained jacket reached for the pen. At that exact moment, every phone in the room began to vibrate at once. Faces changed. A name buried beneath shell companies and erased headlines had resurfaced on the markets. Emma didn't look at her phone. She looked at him. 6 weeks earlier, the Whitfield library smelled of leather and lemon polish, the way it had smelled since Emma was a child. The afternoon light came in slantwise across the long Persian rug, catching the dust her stepmother's housekeeper never quite managed to get out of the air. Gerald Whitfield sat behind the mahogany desk. Patricia stood at the tall window with her arms folded, looking out at the garden as though none of this required her direct attention. Clifford, her father's younger brother, sat in the armchair in the corner, slowly turning a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "Sit down, Emma," her father said. She sat, he told her without preamble, which was his particular form of mercy. The Whitfield group was not struggling. It was collapsing. 3 consecutive failed investments. A leveraged acquisition gone badly wrong. The quiet, devastating withdrawal of a major institutional partner 3 months ago that no one had been able to replace. In 6 weeks, unless something changed, the company would be forced into a structured bankruptcy. Emma listened. She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her feet. "There is one solution," her father said. She did not expect what came next. "There was a creditor," he said, "reached indirectly through a chain of holding companies, a man who had agreed to extend a critical operational lifeline, not in exchange for equity, not in exchange for repayment terms, in exchange for a marriage. His name is Daniel Hayes," Gerald said. "I know what a transactional marriage is," Emma said, her voice flat. "I'm asking why you think I would agree to one." "Because the alternative," Clifford said from the armchair, not looking up from his glass, "is that all of this goes away. The company, the apartment, the foundation, the staff, all of it." Patricia turned from the window. "We're not asking you to love him, Emma. We're asking you to be practical." "Who is he?" Her father's pause was almost imperceptible. "A single father. A local man. He has a daughter. He lives simply." "He's poor," Emma said. "He's modest. He's poor. That's what you're telling me. You want me to marry a man with no money, to save a company that has no money." "The arrangement has been made," her father said. "The paperwork is prepared." She looked at the 3 of them. At her father's studied composure. At Patricia's careful blankness. At the glass in Clifford's hand. "The price to keep all of this," she said slowly, "is me." No one corrected her. They left her there. The door closed. She heard their footsteps move down the hall and into the parlor. She did not move. She looked at the black and white photograph of her grandfather above the desk. He was standing in front of the first Whitfield building, hat in hand, looking at the camera with the unguarded confidence of a man who believed he was building something for someone he loved. For the first time since she had come home from London, Emma felt very clearly that the structure beneath her feet was not her. It was something she had been standing on. There was a difference. She did not cry. She turned out the desk lamp and walked upstairs and packed a single rolling suitcase. She packed it as though for 2 weeks. She did not yet allow herself to think any further than that. Dorchester sat at the city's southern edge, a neighborhood that had once been working class and was now in the ambiguous middle stage of someone else's gentrification. The houses were small. The trees were old. The street was quiet in the particular way of places where people actually lived their lives, rather than performed them. Daniel Hayes's house was a 1940s craftsman bungalow with a green front door and a porch that sagged slightly on the left. A bicycle leaned against the side fence. Wind chimes made of driftwood and sea glass hung from the eaves and turned in the spring air. Emma stood at the front gate with her rolling suitcase and looked at the house for a long moment. Daniel unlocked the door and held it open. She walked in. The ceilings were low. The floors were original hardwood worn to a warm honey color. A kitchen opened off the front room, painted a soft yellow, with copper pots hanging from a rack and a bowl of clementines on the counter. It was clean. That was the first thing she noticed, and she hated that it surprised her. Then she saw the girl, 8 years old, small for her age, dark hair, an expression of absolutely unguarded curiosity. She wore a t-shirt with a diagram of the solar system on it and held a book about deep-sea creatures pressed against her chest. "Hi," the girl said. "Are you going to live here now, Lily?" Daniel said, quiet but not sharp. "Yes," Emma said. For now, Lily considered this with focused seriousness, the way someone files information they expect to need later. Then she looked at her father. "Dad, she's pretty." "I know," Daniel said. Emma looked away. In the days that followed, she mapped the rhythms of the house like a spy cataloging foreign territory. Daniel rose at 5:30. By the time she came out of her room at 7, coffee was made and there was food on the table. Eggs, toast, fruit, whatever the house had. He never announced it. He just left it there. He worked at an independent garage 3 blocks away. He left every morning at 7:15 and returned at 6. On Tuesdays, he picked Lily up early for her swimming lesson. On Thursdays, he stayed at the school for what Emma gathered was a science club. He did not impose his schedule on hers. He did not ask her for anything. She found this, in its own way, more unsettling than hostility would have been. It was a Wednesday morning when the small thing happened. She had just ended a video call with a former colleague about a real estate investment trust that was being restructured. She had been going back and forth on the merits of a particular debt equity position. She walked into the kitchen to refill her coffee and found Daniel at the sink, washing dishes. "Sorry," she said. "Was I loud?" "No." He did not turn around. He rinsed a glass. "The swap structure they're proposing," he said, "only works if the underlying yield assumptions hold. If their cap rate projections are off by more than 40 basis points, the whole thing reverses." Emma stopped pouring her coffee. She turned to look at him. He was rinsing another glass. He did not look up. That's a very specific observation." "You were talking loud enough," he said. "Where did you learn about cap rates?" He set the glass on the drying rack. "Read it somewhere." He dried his hands on a dish towel and left the kitchen. She stood there with her coffee going cold and watched the empty doorway where he had been. That evening at dinner, Lily talked about a documentary she had seen at school about hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. There were creatures down there, she said, that did not need sunlight at all. They lived on chemicals from the rocks. They had been living down there, maybe, for 1 billion years. She turned to Emma with her direct, careful eyes. "We could go sometime. Dad takes me to the coast. There's a tide pool place." Emma looked at her plate. She felt Daniel watching her, not directly. "Maybe," she said. It was the first time, in any conversation in that house, she had not said no. 2 mornings later, Emma was coming in from the garden, where she had taken to making her morning calls because the light was better there. She came through the side door and stopped in the hallway. Daniel was on the phone. His voice was low, unhurried. She caught fragments. "Hold the Singapore position." I said, "Hold it. Don't touch it until I tell you." A pause. "The Harris acquisition, no. Walk away. The liabilities aren't priced in. Tell them I'm not available. I won't be available. They know why." He hung up as she came around the corner. He looked at her with no expression at all. "Work?" she asked. "Yeah." He put on his coveralls and drove to the garage. That afternoon she opened the financial news on her laptop. The Harris acquisition was a mid-sized logistics company that had been the subject of a quiet bidding war for the past month. By 6 o'clock that evening, the front-running bidder had withdrawn from the deal. By morning, the deal was dead. She sat at her desk and thought about a man in coveralls in a hallway in Dorchester telling someone, on a phone, to walk away from an acquisition that had subsequently collapsed. She thought about the cap rate remark. She thought about her Italian leather pumps. She had worn them to a meeting the week before, caught the heel on a curb, and set them by the front door, meaning to take them to be repaired. The next morning the scuff had been gone, the leather buffed. She had said nothing. He had said nothing. She had assumed she imagined it. She did not assume anymore. That afternoon she went to a Whitfield Group board meeting. Clifford was there, in his usual chair at her father's right hand, with the easy confidence of someone who had always known the room belonged to him. He took the meeting from her by the third item. He did it gently. He did it with the appearance of helpfulness. He asked twice with great care about her judgment after her recent personal circumstances. She drove home with her hands locked on the wheel. In the front hall of the bungalow she snapped at Daniel about something small, the way the mail had been stacked, the fact that the porch light had been left on, things that did not matter, and that she knew did not matter. He listened. He did not answer. He went into the kitchen, opened his toolbox, and fixed the cabinet door that had been hanging on a misaligned hinge for 6 months. He did it in 9 minutes. She watched from the doorway, arms folded, and felt suddenly very tired. Lily came out of the hall with a clementine in each hand. She offered one to Emma. Emma took it. For 3 seconds, she almost smiled. Then she caught herself. She went into her room and closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed and held the clementine in her palm and thought very clearly for the first time. There is something wrong about him in a way that means I am wrong about him. The Hartwell Foundation annual gala was held in the ballroom of a hotel that had been old when her grandmother was young. Emma had attended every year since she was 16. She had tried to avoid going this year. She had tried 3 different excuses. Her father had been specific. Her absence after the marriage would be read as weakness. The company could not afford more of that. She had not planned to bring Daniel, he offered. She had looked at the grease-dark crescent under his thumbnail that did not quite wash out and said, without